Stuart Storley with Sailing World Magazine. Welcome back to our interview series from the America's Cup World Series in Newport. Standing next to me is America's Cup veteran Steve Erickson. Steve, of course, as many people know, is a 1984 gold medalist in the star class with Bill Buchan. And then, of course, he went to the America's Cup, and this is now his 7th campaign. Is that right, Steve?
Imagine that.
Fourth with Luna Rossa, so you found quite a home here with the Italian team.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they appreciate my experience and expertise, and I keep being asked back. So, yeah, no, I'm grateful for that, and it's a great group.
All right. Let's take a look at the team. You guys came a little bit late to this America's Cup race. This is only your 3rd event, whereas most of the other teams have now done 6, and they've, of course, had more time to prepare. They've had more time to train and more time to develop their plans for the AC-72. When you guys started this process, when Patrizio Bertelli of Prada, the head of the syndicate, gave you the go-ahead, I imagine you had some benchmarks, some time frame for how you're going to catch up. How do you think you've done relative to those time frames?
Well, pretty good. And, you know, you talk about kind of the genesis of the campaign. I mean, a little bit what allowed, you know, us to get our foot in the door is being able to tag team with Team New Zealand and, you know, essentially having a boat that a little bit of work had been done on before we showed up to the show. So that kick-started the campaign. We're looking forward to the Kiwis are launching their boat here in a few weeks. We'll launch our boat early in the Northern Hemisphere fall, which, you know, will be the spring in New Zealand. But and both boats will get sailing down there until we have to go our separate ways, you know, come Christmas time. But that's allowed us to get kind of into the 72-foot game. That aside is, you know, these are pretty off-the-shelf boats, which when you get beyond the fact that they're winged, which we now have, it's kind of like a hard sail and it's still a sailing catamaran. The guys come from catamaran backgrounds and, you know, they've caught up with the expertise, and we'll see how this event goes. You know, we're still learning a lot.
You guys had quite good results. Chris Draper has been up there in a couple of events, and Paul Campbell-Janes and the other helm has been not far behind him. People say when you ask sailors about these boats, they say it's not nearly as difficult as it looks, or it's not nearly as complex as it sounds. You know, most people are very impressed with these things, but they are sailboats, and the wing trims much like a mainsail.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but no. I mean, these guys are experts, and they're good. I mean, they're good at what they do. You know, you talked about Chris. You know, Chris has a little experience from Team Korea, obviously, so he brought that experience into the team. That helped a lot. CJ and Max Serena came off winning the Extreme 40 circuit last year, where they do a lot more racing, you know, than what we're doing here. So guys are pretty tuned up getting into, you know, the catamaran and the format. It's just as you would in any class, moving from a J24 to an Etchells is, you know, what's different? Where do I take my strengths from one class and apply them into the next class?
Let's look specifically at your role here. You are kind of the general manager. Is that an appropriate description?
Well, you know, specifically, I coordinate the sailing team. So I coordinate what goes on, and we call it the circus. So you alluded to earlier, you know, things are a little bit fast and furious, and we're moving around, and we are. You know, this place breaks down in a matter of 30 hours, and off it goes. And, you know, this time it's going on to a train to San Francisco, and we'll pick up the pieces in a month's time and put it all back together, and it takes 3 days to throw it all back together again, and off we are training in that venue. So, you know, the circus leapfrogs itself along, but outside of that, we've got another veteran, Matteo Platzi, that's overlooking and overseeing our 72 project. So how they dovetail together, you know, that's the complexity of it. And I think if people are observant, they're looking around and seeing the top 4 teams are a little bit slowly starting to play down the 45. Because the focus is going towards the 72, which quite a few of the boats are going to launch in the next couple of months.
Sure, sure. How different is this America's Cup? As we were talking before we started rolling here, this is, you know, the old America's Cup structure was very much set up camp in the venue, or maybe in a training venue, train there for 2 or 3 years maybe, move to the venue or be at the venue to begin with. You're now on the road, everything is email, sailors are flying in, they're flying out. Is it completely different, or is it not quite as different as we might think?
Yeah. You touched upon a very strong point, and we've pinpointed it a little bit. We've got a little bit of a mantra at this team where flexibility is our strength. If you're not flexible, you're going to die at this game. So every day is a new day. I'm a round-the-world veteran. That was one of the things I used to say that I liked about the round-the-world race versus the America's Cup was every day is a new day, where the America's Cup was kind of like every day was the same day. You were just getting the next 0.001% of performance out of it. And This is fast and furious, and it's fun. I think you look around and everybody's smiling, so it's a little bit chaotic. It takes a lot of organization, but I think it's more interesting to those following it. You know, it is, we haven't even talked about how it's been brought closer to the masses where people can physically see it from the shore. And then with the internet and all that's being done with the technology, I think that's, you know, they're all huge pluses.
Let's look at the sailing team. You have 2 sailing teams now. I imagine you'll have to expand that as you bring the 72 on board. What sort of sailors, what sort of athletes are you recruiting to expand your team, and how do you go from the AC-45, which is similar but quite different from the AC-72?
Yeah, I think the simple answer, and we can make it a complicated answer, but I think the simple answer is, you know, there will be 4 pedestals with 8 guys who are going to grind, and they're going to do a lot of grinding, and it's going to be quick. It's going to be 30-minute races, but it's going to be grinding the whole time because boards have to be ground up and down, right? A-sails have to be hoisted and dehoisted. Jibs have to be tacked, trimmed. So that's the caliber. I mean, on the 45, typically you look around, there's probably one grinder allocated to each 45 who does a lot of the either bow or halyard work. So I think as physiques, you'll be looking for 2 or 3 or 4 more of those style of sailors. So very athletic, but big and strong.
Will we be looking at the same? I mean, some of the grinders, as you well know, were often the same names, right? We had, trying to think who was the Kiwi grinder that was with Luna Rossa Meat, right? Andrew Taylor, exactly. who was with America's Cup veteran. Are we going to see those grinders back, or are we going to see a new breed of grinders that maybe are more like crew athletes?
Well, it's interesting what you say. You know, the rumor mill out there is that one of the call it the Big Four, has got a little pod on the back of their 72 on the beam where there'll be a grinding station. You know, with that layout, I think you could have the caliber of grinder who stays on the handles. I think other styles of boats, which I think the majority from the rumor mill will be, is that the handles will be on the platforms and people will have to hightail it from one side to the other or be left on the leeward side to finish a job while his compatriots get to the high side. So there's going to be a lot more running. And I think for those that have played American baseball and done or basketball and done the line drills, it's going to be a little bit of that with a grind in between.
So we're looking at basically a suicide on a trampoline, going at 30 knots, running back and forth with someone yelling and blowing a whistle every 30 seconds.
I think suicide's a big term, but there's going to be a lot of running, there's going to be a lot of heavy breathing. People are going to have to be fit, for sure.
Well, suicide, but that was what we called it in basketball when you went from the baseline to the foul line to the halfway line. So it's just back and forth all the time. Right. What do the next 3 or 4 months bring for Luna Rossa? You guys will move the circus out to the West Coast for 2 events in San Francisco, which gives you a little bit of stability, maybe a little bit of chance to train there as well, I imagine. You'll bring your boat online in New Zealand, is that right?
Yeah. Basically, it's a transition period. 2 events coming up. The core group is based out of Europe. There's quite a few families involved in the group. The team's growing. Here we've got 28 to 31 people. In New Zealand already working on the 72, or another 25 people that'll grow to 40. So when the team comes together, it's round numbers can be 65 people. All those people need to be relocated. Half of them have been. So we just spoke about it earlier. I'm working on that right now. It's just periods where people will transfer between events, get the training going in San Francisco. Obviously it's going to be the period of the Cup cycle, and we're going to want to spend a bit of time training there in San Francisco at the America's Cup venue 1 year in advance. So all those projects are going on the next couple months, and then we'll be launching the 72 a few months out. But our heads have got to get into that, and we got to get into the office and get our heads behind the computer and get working on the boat for sure.
Okay. This is now, as we mentioned before, your 7th America's Cup campaign, and what may be more rare about that is the fact you've gone through 3 different classes. You started off in the 12-meter to the ACC boats. Do you think that this is a positive progression for the sport?
Well, I'll give you a little bit of history. My first America's Cup out of San Francisco with Paul Kayard, with Tom Blackaller, we really wanted to bring the Cup back to San Francisco. So in that vein, it's pretty neat that the Cup has come in my history in the Cup back to San Francisco. I think that's a cool thing. My first Cup in Perth in 12 meters in a lot of wind. You look at the veterans, and we talk about Andrew Taylor, was one of the rookies back in those days, and people get a real smile, as I'm smiling now, about Perth. That was a cool event. And I think San Francisco is going to have a lot of Perth about it. You know, it's going to be breezy, and people are going to be open-eyed, you know, when they first get their training the first few months. You know, the Oracle boys are well into it, but they were open-eyed when they got there. And I think there's going to be a lot of fond memories and a lot of big smiles in the coming years reflecting back on how that event in San Francisco played out.
Right. Last question for you. When Luna Rossa started back in Prada for the 99 2000 America's Cup, it was very much an Italian team, Italian leader, very much Italian sailors. That has changed. You know, you brought in Jimmy Spithill. Now you have two British helmsmen. How important is it that this team has an Italian face? You do have a Max Serena as the skipper. How important is there more Italian sailors on it? And I ask the question because, you know, I think a lot of Americans are wondering whether or not more Americans on BMW or on Oracle. Should they be? Is that something they have a legitimate worry?
Well, it's a loaded question, and I think it's a two-part question. One, the America's Cup of World, in my seven cycles of doing it, is definitely become more of an international flavor. I mean, it's just grown that way, where I think when we started, we had the Kiwi team, we had the American teams, we had the Italian teams, we had the Australian teams, you know. Now you look around, any team up and down this row, and it's very international, you know. Within our team, I think there's 5 nationalities right here on this floor today. So I think that's one part of it. Outside of yachting, I think that's a little bit of the flavor of the world we live in. The world's just becoming a smaller place, very international. And if you want to get to the next level, is, you know, we can talk about America and how we've gotten a little lethargic and how we're kind of falling behind in the world economic scheme. And, you know, maybe there's a little bit of that to it. You know, maybe we got to get a kick in our step and raise our level. So I think all points are valid.
Yeah. All right. Well, Steve, thanks for talking with us. Obviously a great event for you guys here. We're looking forward. The sun is out finally, but the heat is gone. So the breeze is on. It looks like everything is ready for the America's Cup to come to Newport.
Yeah. Good talking to you, Stuart.
All right. Thanks,
Yep.
Steve.
Cheers.